Please give a warm welcome to writer, director Nikolaj Arcel and Mads Mikkelsen.
Thank you so much. You're so kind.
Of course. I'll start with you, Nikolaj. I want to ask you about the cinematography. There's a depth of field and a sense of scale in the cinematography where we're able to take in the landscape, but also see the people up close. Can you tell us about that approach?
Yes, I can actually. It was a very. I had done sort of this kind of epic film once before.
A royal affair.
A royal affair, and I felt there was something. There was something I wanted to try differently this time in terms of the visuals, and I spoke with the DOP at length about it. We've been working together since film school for many years, so we always try to do something new every time. And we actually had to go back to sort of David Lean, you know, Lawrence of Arabia and those films.
When I introduced the film, I mentioned that this film recalls David Lean.
I mean, no comparison to Lawrence of Arabia, but certainly what we it's one of my favorite films of all time. And what we did was we looked at the way he uses that depth of field, and it's very interesting because even in the close-ups of Peter O'Toole, you can still sort of sense the entire landscape behind everything that's going. The hundreds of extras behind him, and we were trying. Not that we had the budget for that kind of thing, but we still tried to emulate that visual way of working. And at times, you know, our for instance, our lighting department were a little bit. Are you sure you want to do this kind of thing? It's kind of it's not really being done anymore so much. So it was a very particular style that we chose that I think fit this film very well.
But the reason why you did that is because you wanted the sense of scale, but also the intimacy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we wanted the intimacy. For me, this is all about the characters, right, and the character's journey. But it's also about nature and growing and land and landscapes and desolate, you know, landscapes. And so I just felt that even in the close-ups of beautiful mess, and there should be there should be we should feel the surroundings at all times. I think so. I think that was very much part of it.
Yeah, Matt, I mentioned to you that your performance is remarkable because we see people transform in movies. Something happens, and all of a sudden, you know, they're a changed person. Your change throughout this movie is so small. It's like every scene you see like a little change in the character. By the time we watch the last scene, whoa, this man has transformed himself. But how difficult was it for you to calibrate that little small steps, the change in the character?
Well, once we agreed and once it was in the script, it wasn't that difficult. I think that the process of agreeing on that and figuring out when is it going to happen, page 88, Buster Keaton's little smile opens the sky. I'm a big Buster Keaton fan. I do think that less is more sometimes. But the character is interesting because he's shaping his own destiny. Obviously, a lot of things is happening to this character. A lot of things is coming from outside, but he's also the master of his own destiny in the sense that he has so many chances to go left instead of right, and he chooses right. So he is a big part of the reason there is a drama here. So we needed him to be a specific character that do not need anyone around him. He doesn't see anyone around him. He wants to be something that he hates. He wants to be a noble person, and he hates them, which is already dramatic. So we were like constantly looking at each other. Is it now? No, it's later. Is it now? No, it's later. And we did agree on it, but we got in doubt. We were getting fed up with him being so stubborn. But well, we stuck to our guns.
Nikolaj, another thing that when I introduced the film that I said that is remarkable is that I don't recall seeing a film where a background character slowly inches up and becomes a major character. You know, can you tell us about writing that in that process of, you know, I mean, she's in the background at the beginning, and then at the end, she's a major character.
Yeah. I mean, I always felt, and no offense to you, Mads, that and Barbara was kind of the secret main character of this film, you know, because, and we worked very hard with Amanda, the actress, on this, that we spoke about. She called it the invisibility of her in the beginning. She intentionally wanted her to seem almost a little bit invisible in the beginning. That she's slowly taking more and more space, her own space, and she becomes stronger and stronger and more powerful until she becomes basically an avenging angel, right? She saves Ludwig, she saves everybody. She kills her, you know, the enemy basically, and the man who killed her husband. So that was such a thrill to be able to. And of course, this was in the novel. I have to say, it wasn't our invention, but it was just such a thrill to try to do this sort of surprising evolution of Anne Barbara in the film, because really
Also,
when people watch it in the beginning, they don't think she's going to become what she does.
The same thing with the adopted daughter,
right?
Is that you don't think she's just going to be in the background, and all of a sudden she just becomes a major role.
But that was also the plan, for her to be nothing, but she was so good. No, she's obviously, these are the little things that little rain that drips on my character that he doesn't see for a long time, and then they keep knocking on his door, and they become something that he never saw, right? But she was an amazing little actress, so for that reason as well.
Exactly.
So she did grow on the film, and she did expand her.
But Mads,
career.
acting-wise, how does it work for you? This dynamic of having actors that at the beginning start, you know, in the background, they're not major roles, and slowly they become major part of what of the film.
Well, it's not a surprise to me because I read the script. Firstly, secondly, I don't see it like that, obviously, because these are my colleagues. I know where it's going, and so let's take the very first meeting I have with Anne Barbara, where the priest is introducing this couple. And I have no other option than to hire them, even though it's against the law, and I'm a law-abiding man. Already there, she's not saying anything, but she's not obeying completely, and you get that feeling right away. So that's already there for an actor. We are interacting very early in the film, and then from there on, it just gets worse and worse for my character, and she grows more and more. But she grows to become the most important piece in his life, and he never saw that coming.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, because we were talking about this evolution of Ludwig, and I also have to say that you make it sound so simple, Mads, but it's not a lot of people can do what you do, and I just think it still moves me to watch your performance in this film. And just remembering on the set, just even when we do the time shift in the end, when he's supposed to be 10 years older, I guess, you know, it was so magical to watch, because they didn't really do any makeup, you know. It was just a little, and I was like, okay, we're ready to do this scene. You're 10 years older, and then suddenly it was like, wait a minute, he's 10 years older now. How did he do that? It's almost like just a little thing you do with the walk and the face, and it's so subtle. But all those little subtleties that you do is what makes this work. This evolution that you're talking about, that's so subtle. It's really all mass. It's quite incredible, I think. You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, just to add to there's always a constant fear from filmmakers when you have to like jump in time and make somebody older or younger. So you can do the computer thing. You can add some long beard. We did a lot of things, and I ended up looking like a Japanese samurai warrior. And we were like, no, let's take it all away again, and let's just do something with the eyes, and I'll just walk a little slower. I'll just be a little slower, and then little things. And we agreed on that right away because it's such a tricky thing to do, especially if you only have 10 minutes left of the film and you want to make that jump, right? So we did agree on approaching it in a more internal way than an external way.
Nikolaj, a royal affair in this film, they both take place in the same time period. There's only 20 years apart. Tell us, what is it about this time period that has obsessed you?
I think it's one of the most fascinating centuries. You know, it's the Enlightenment, it's the French Revolution, it's the Independence War. It's all these big changes that were happening all over the planet, and you can feel it in how the people started thinking differently and writing differently and feeling differently and being allowed to dream of bigger things. And you know, and with the royal affair, we stayed in the sort of upper echelons. We were among the royals, and everything was about romantic love and, you know, the king. And I felt that I didn't necessarily really want to go back to the 1750s or the 1750s, 60s, but when I read the novel, I was like, this is actually perfect. I now have a way to do the other side of the coin. It's no longer the royals and the court and all the fineries. This is about the brutality of life, you know, when you have nothing and you're just trying to survive, and you're trying to be somebody, and it's really tough. And I felt that was the perfect. It's almost like a companion piece, right? In a way, you can watch these two films and go, okay, these are the two sides of the world back then, you know. And of course, same guy playing two very different people, but yeah.
But this is 20 years before the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
So even if it had happened during the Enlightenment, none of these characters would have noticed. And that's also like, we see the Enlightenment as a very important part of history, but the people living in it were not necessarily benefiting from it at the moment. So whatever happened, if Aunt Barbara was in the situation she was in during the Enlightenment, she would still be a person we had to admire, that for the mere fact that she can still walk and talk after what she's been through. But she would never benefit from it. So they were living in a time where they had to find a way to survive.
I'm curious to hear you speak about this dynamic between Kalen and Schinkel, where to me...
This Schinkel.
Yes. Thank you, touche. Where, you know, one represents order, control. You know, Matt's character is all about control and order, and then you have this other one that thrives on chaos. Can you tell us about working with that dynamic, with the two opposites?
It was so thrilling to write an antagonist who I feel was probably closer to, you know, what is real and the reality of things than the protagonist. Because honestly, if you ask me, and having lived through a lot of chaos in my life, and good things and bad things, I think we all, human beings, we learn that no matter how much we try to control things, we will always find that life does something else to us, right? We can't control it. But Ludwig genuinely thinks that he can control everything if he just does it this way, and then he'll get this and he'll get the title. And I think that it was interesting to have an antagonist who was more on point, you know, in a way. Not that he's a horrible person, but his philosophy is probably closer to mine. Life is chaos, and you got to lean into it. And I thought that was interesting. That gives him a little bit more of a flavor than if he'd just been like, you know, I want to take over the planet or something like that. But, you know, I thought that was interesting. I think we agreed on that as well. I think we both believe we're probably a little closer to...
No, obviously, when you said the man who wants to control everything, and then you said, oh, the guy who believes that life is chaos, immediately there's something ringing in our head going like, oh, Jimi Hendrix, we love Jimi Hendrix, right? That's rock and roll. He is rock and roll. Obviously, he's using his power in a terrible manner. But the actor, this young man, It's not done a lot. Rising star, fantastic, incredible talent. And Nick together decided that when you watch the film, obviously, I see it now, and I also saw when we shot it. I see him as the kid who had all the toys when I was a kid, and we all played with him, but he was well aware that we didn't like him. You know, so he feels pity for himself constantly for good reason, and he does that in all the scenes. When he's doing the worst thing imaginable, he feels pity for himself, and it's such a smart trick for an actor and for a character. It makes him a real human being, you know, somebody I recognize.
It is based on history and it's based on a novel. Was he as villainous as you I mean, I can't recall a more despicable villain in recent film history.
I mean, as far as we've researched, and our historical researchers who know a lot about the period and the time, and this guy in particular, the Shingle, he was a despicable, he was not a good person. He would torture his farmers, you know, he would torture his staff, he would violate, you know, the female staff. He did all those things. So, I mean, for sure, he was a horrible person in real life. And then the novelist Ida Jessen, she probably created some layers, and also to Ludwig. She fictionalized these historical events somewhat, so some of the characters aren't real. Ludwig is real, and the Shingle is real, and the others are part of her sort of novel, the fictionalized version of events.
Landscape is another character in the film, is essential to the film. You know, tell us about shooting.
It's, you know what, it was so unique because I've never in my career, and I haven't heard anybody experience this, we actually were able to shoot this film where this actually happened. So the piece of heath that Ludwig built his house on 300 and something years ago, it still exists, this little piece of heath. It's protected since then. And they graciously allowed us to come and film. So the landscape is real. It's where it happened. And that's so unique for a film. You know, we always go to Toronto or, you know, Atlanta or somewhere. We do the same in Denmark. You always go somewhere else. You go to Prague or Germany and you shoot your films. But in this case, we're actually able to shoot it exactly where it happened, which is so unique and nice to think about.
And Matt, what was it like for you to be working in this harsh environment? And
it makes everything easier. So the thing about acting is that it's often reacting. But if you have a real thing there, you don't have to do anything. It's there. I always compare it with, like, a lot of filmmakers talk about how difficult it is to work with children and animals. And I completely disagree. It's just, you have to hang in there because they're doing the right thing, and you just have to hang in there. And that's the same with the heath. The wind is there, you get tired, you look worn out after a few days. So you don't have to do that. You don't have to act that anymore. It's there. So just hang in there, like you have to hang in with the little girl. You know, she knows what she's doing. So just hang in there, and maybe you will forget yourself and become better.
And very sweet. And, you know, tell me about working with Arcel. I mean, this is the second time you've worked with him, but this time around, this is a far more nuanced, far more complex character you're playing here. You know, tell us about your collaboration.
Yeah, I think the other guy was nuanced as well. The man who wants to obviously change the world, make it into a better place, and turns out that he becomes a dictator, and he didn't see it coming. That's fairly nuanced. I think this guy is more simple in a different way, but we linger on him more here, so we see his journey in a different way. As you pointed out in the beginning, it turns out that at the end of the film, he had a tremendous journey, but we didn't see it. We didn't see it coming. It just happened in front of our eyes. So it's a different kind of work. How is it working without him? I mean, I waited 10 years for him calling me again. I don't know what the fuck happened. So when he did, I was over the moon, and because I loved the first time and I loved the second one even more. There's not a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, doing films like this in Denmark. The scale of it, and the historical films, the budget, but also like our tradition of kitchen sink drama, to throw that into an epic film as well. So it's not just epic, but it's also humans right in there, real films, real feelings. I think it's quite unique, and I think he's a master of it, and nobody does that in our part of the world.
I think the nuance also you mentioned, I think it's also just me getting a little better at my job. You know, I think, you know, the Royal Affair was 12 years ago, and when I look at it today, I still love it very much. And Mads will defend it too. I mean, when I mention that there's anything wrong with that movie, he will start fighting me. But as you can hear, right? But there's nothing wrong with that film.
Maybe the young girl.
But this is me having, I think, grown in terms of daring to, or being able to create characters that are more complex, and not being afraid of. I usually worked with sort of people who slightly less nuanced. You know, people who want to do good, bad versus good, and I think this is, while it is bad versus good, the main character is certainly not, you know, just one thing. He's a very complex character. He's in it for his own narcissistic reason. He's ambitious, and so I think that the nuance that you mentioned, I agree with you. I think that this is a little. I'm sorry. This is a little. This is slightly more.
You can have 2 minutes, and then I'll take over. Go on.
This is slightly more nuanced in terms of the complexity of what Ludwig is, right? Whereas Struensee was probably a little more of a hero. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, you have this. You have, don't fight. You have in this film this character who's so, I mean, he is the lead, but he's so compulsive. He's so obsessive. And he has this awakening about family and the important things in life other than fame and fortune. And I find that just complex and at the same time very touching. I mean, it feels very personal, this film, very emotional.
It's so personal to me. I became a father for the first time in my life 3.5 years ago. And I know that when you look at me, you go like, that's a little late. And yes, it was a little late. But it was such a profound experience for me, and I know that it is for every single person who has kids. But I was so late into that sort of huge thing in life that I never realized it until it happened. You know, I didn't realize how big of a thing it was. I could see my friends having kids. They're like, yeah, they're cute and they're nice, and yeah, problems and diaper changes. It seems a little tough. And then when I had my own, you know, now have 2. My first, I was like, oh, holy God, now. He's what it's all about. I just need to protect him and help him, and I have to put myself aside. And at the same time, when he was born, I read the novel, and immediately it clicked with me. This novel is about that experience. I mean, I'm not Ludwig, but it's about drive and ambition and versus opening yourself up to love and family and truth, right? So it was so perfect timing for me to do this, and I put all my own sort of new emotions as a father into the and my Moose and Ludwig relationship. And of course, Mads is a professional father. You've been, how old are your kids?
They're real people.
They're real people already.
They're 30. I'm a granddad.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so we, it is a very personal story for me.
We touched a little bit about this before we got here and during the Q&A, the fact that nobody makes films like this. You know, Mads mentioned kitchen sink, but the scope, you know, the epic quality of the film, is that something that you strive for? I want to do something that nobody else is doing at the point.
I'm gravitating towards those kind of films. Not so much that I want to do something that nobody else. I just think it's tastes, right? There's certain things that you just feel that you're in love with. And I fell in love with Lawrence Arabia. I fell in love with the Spielberg films of the 70s and the Coppolas and the big sort of more epic. I just there's something about epics. I keep wanting to watch these big epics. I love watching movies that feel like reading a novel a little bit, in a sense. Do you know what I mean? And it's so rare that they're getting made. And I just feel that that if my career could be about one thing, it would be striving to constantly keep bettering myself at this kind of film. It doesn't always have to be historical. It can be set in modern day, but the epic feeling is something that I really enjoy and would like to keep sort of working on.
Yeah. Yes. Matt, I was going to jump in and ask you about working with Schinkel. Tell us the dynamic of your relationship is so antagonistic, but you walking on the set and having to be toe-to-toe with him.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing for a young actor to come in and create and manifest himself in this character in front of me. So we casted quite a few actors from Denmark, young people, and they all. It's going to sound pretentious, but they grew up with me. I'm kind of like could be their dad, right? So it always start out with this, shaking hands, and they go looking at me a little, and they go around like this a little. But they have to take the room. I mean, that's what we're doing here. That's the audition. And he was the only one who just sat down and just stared at me. Didn't give a fuck. And we did the scene, and then later on he told me he was so nervous meeting me, but he was just literally, I could hold his eyes forever, and he would just keep going, improvising, saying shit things in my face, right? No. And eventually I would just look the other way, and he won the scene. He won, right? And that's what this character is all about. And that was not the only reason why he got it, because he was so nuanced in all the little things we did. But he revealed that he was so nervous, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Because he just felt like a prick, But he was acting, and so it was wonderful. He's such a fantastic person and a fantastic actor, and we got along really well. It was obviously important that we could have fun outside shooting, but also once we got in there, that was a power dynamic that had to be there, right? Mm-hmm. And that was not a problem at all. He's one of those actors who can dive in and leave the character like that. And I appreciate it.
The dynamic between the two of you is tremendous. I mean, it's electric when the two of you are on screen.
Yeah, but that wasn't really, I just really personally wanted to kill him. Because he was so good. No, it was fantastic. I mean, we also have to obviously thank Nikolaj, because there's a lot of things to juggle for a young actor, and a lot of words and a lot of ways you can approach the scene. And I think that you had some really good approaches of telling, let's go this way, just a little nuance here, and then it rang a bell with him.
Yeah, it's terrific.
Also, I mean, one of the great things about working with you, Mads, is that he's it's very protective of all the young actors. Like Mads will always, on Royal Fair and this one, we had a lot of sort of fairly newcomers and people who hadn't done a lot of things before, and they are really nervous about working with Mads or meeting Mads, and maybe even working with me, So, but Mads takes everybody under his wing, and you're very caring with all these young actors, and making sure that they always feel safe and that they feel good, and they making jokes and having fun, and it's really, it just makes everything so much easier. There's no pretension, there's no diva mannerism, there's nothing of that. It's all just like, we're all gonna do this together. We're a group, we're an ensemble, right? So that it also helps me as a director a lot.
A couple of reasons for that. One is obviously if he sucks, the scene sucks, and then I suck. But that's not really the reason. The reason is that I experienced the very first thing I did. I worked with my big hero of all time, a Danish actor, I'm not going to mention his name, who's not here anymore. And I just thought he was the best actor in history. And when I met him, he didn't even look at me. He didn't want to talk to me. He wanted to play with a tennis ball. And I was like, what? So I promised myself, if anybody ever thinks I'm a little good, I'm going to be the nicest guy on set. This is insane what he did. But the film turned out good, and he was fantastic. I was okay. So that's, you can't do that. You can't do that to anyone, and you can't do that to a film. It's just not happening.
Well, you guys...
Can I just say,
Yeah,
after
go
that,
ahead.
he turned out to be a really sweet man, but he had an issue.
Well, it's a remarkable film, and thank you so much for the two of you for being here. Yeah, you guys are
Guys, thank you so much.
amazing. Thank you, everybody.